All right, welcome to video 4 of my Fourth Amendment series, trying to help you understand the Fourth Amendment, what it says, what it doesn't say, and then some modern issues that we have to deal with, from the Fourth Amendment during this time of coronavirus and being stuck in our houses and not at school. So let's review a little bit. And so far what we have is that the Fourth Amendment is your privacy rights amendment. And we've talked about how it basically secures your person, house, papers, and effects, your body, your house, legal life, and your stuff against unreasonable searches and seizures. Previous video talked about what might be a reasonable search. Also, we talked about how warrants provide a built-in exception to this unreasonable search idea. Here's some stuff that you should know. So starting with the stuff that you can find in Part 1's video, you should know that the Fourth Amendment description of privacy, that there is no such thing as privacy in the Fourth Amendment, but rather there is that right to be secured in your house, your person, your effects, and your papers, and that is what the Supreme Court has always said equals privacy. You should know that there are limitations on privacy built into the amendment. There's the idea of a reasonable search instead of an unreasonable search, and there's also the idea of the warrant. You should understand some of those reasonable exceptions. We talked about hot pursuit and consent and exigent circumstances. If these things are something you don't understand yet, you can look back in Part 1. Understand the impact and what is the exclusionary rule, as well as what I mean when I say the Fourth Amendment is a personal right. In Part 2, we talked about some more reasonable exceptions, talked about good faith and a few other ideas, so if you need to review those, make sure you do. And then I mentioned Katz versus United States and the creation of the reasonable expectation of privacy concept, how you do have privacy even when you aren't private, maybe. If you expect to be private, and if that expectation is reasonable. In class a long time ago, we talked about Greenwood versus California, the guy with the trash and whether the police could look into his trash without warrant. Did he expect to be private? Was that expectation reasonable? Who decides what's reasonable? A jury and a judge. That's what they do. We started talking about some beginnings of digital challenges, things like what is on my phone that people can see, whose property is that stuff, is it my property, is it the phone company's property. This kind of piggybacks on the video we watched on artificial intelligence. And eventually this kind of settled into a discussion of metadata, this data about data, and how that can be used, and the fact that essentially it's the property of the company that provides the service, not you. You own the text message, but they own the right. They own the information about the text message, the length, the time of day, where it was going, where it was coming from, and how a lot of things can be figured out from this metadata. And that court case that decided that, Smith versus Maryland, back in the 1970s, 1979 actually. So today we're going to start where we left off, and that was a discussion of this metadata and how this information can be used to track, and figure out what's going on, and basically track your population. What you're looking at one more time is a map of Vodafone in Germany, their network, and you can see the people who call the most and who they call. And when you use other data like where they were calling from and what time of day, you can map it. You can find out where you live and where you sleep and all those kinds of things. And it's a little spooky. Here's a good example from just the news. So this is the Washington Post from today. Today's March 25th. And you can see that we're in the middle of coronavirus. Everybody's locked down. People are supposed to be social isolating and using cell phone data right here, based on locations of tens of millions of phones. We can see who's locking down, who's breaking the rules, who's being the good states and the bad states when it comes to following self-isolation. And you can see here, this is just a simple graphic. Nevada, New Jersey, Washington, D.C., Maryland, Connecticut, those kinds of cities over here and those kinds of states doing a very good job of staying home. Wyoming, not so much. Montana, not so much. The idea being that this is just from cell phone data, people tracking where you are, and it's not your data, it's metadata, it's data about data. And I don't know, maybe you find it okay, maybe you find it a little creepy that can be done. When you add this up to basically what's been known as the Internet of Things, this idea that everything we've got these days is connected to the internet, not just my phone, not just my PlayStation, not just my computer, but my vacuum cleaner and everything else. Then things get a little even creepier. I mean, you look at here, Internet of Things is a data farm. Roomba won't be its only profiteer. Roomba, that's the company that makes that vacuum that, during the day it just kind of goes and vacuums by itself. Well, in order to do its job, it is mapping the houses that it vacuums, and over time it gets a perfect blueprint, and Roomba owns the blueprint of those houses, and then it's their property, they can sell it, and who knows, it seems a little creepy. People putting their toothbrushes online, when do you brush, how often do you brush, how long do you brush, is a lot of this stuff is not a big deal, but maybe sometimes it could be used for things we're not very happy about it. Even horses, putting the ability to track your horse in the maybe a chip in the saddle or something like that. And this is huge business. Look at this. It is 7.1 trillion dollars worth of data, and in the next 5 years it's expected to basically collect 44 trillion gigabytes of data, and that is a tremendous amount, and a lot of information about Americans and about you that you don't own. And the question, of course, is always, should you? So a lot of people thought that maybe this is reason why the Fourth Amendment should maybe be what's called the new preferred position. So remember back when we did First Amendment stuff, we talked about preferred position, that it is speech and assembly and petition that is what creates, it is used to protect your other rights. Well, the theory here is that without the right to privacy, there's no real freedom of speech or even freedom of opinion, and therefore there's no democracy, because people who are afraid that if they talk, their lives will be ruined, won't talk. And so maybe privacy is more important these days than speech, and maybe it should be a preferred position. And like I said before in another video, running through the courts right now is some ideas about maybe there should be some the right to be forgotten. I do have a great podcast. If you're interested in some extra credit, please make sure you get a hold of me. I might let you listen to that podcast. So I'm going to cut that video. This video is short, nice short one. Next video will be the last video about privacy, and it will be over abortion.